This is our last lecture in this series, and we're going to talk about environmental law because it fits in so well with the tort law we've just been talking about. But before we get into the lecture, I want to introduce you to my dog Duffy, who you got a snapshot of last time, and apparently you're getting another snapshot this time. And I want to give a shout out to my camera person who claims that the shakiness in the camera comes from the iPhone and not her. And I tell you what, I believe her. Anyway, the other thing I want to say is that, remember I gave you 3 movies that you could get extra credit for watching 2 of them. One of those 3 movies is called Dark Waters. It's the story of a Cincinnati lawyer who took a case against DuPont for polluting the land and injuring a number of people in West Virginia. So that's a good case to, it's a good movie to look at when we're studying environmental law and tort law. Anyway, we're going to talk about environmental law for the next few minutes. Now remember, this is a course on business law, and there is a huge tension between the business desire to increase profit and have fewer regulations, and the desire to make sure that business does not harm the environment, harm the air, harm the water, harm the land, whatever. That tension you have to take into account when you're running, managing, or owning your own business, okay? You always got to keep it in mind. One of the things that's going on right now is that the Trump administration is cutting back the gasoline standards for cars that the auto manufacturers must make. And they're doing it in the name of increasing the productivity and profits of the business. You have to make up your mind whether you'd rather have clean air and clean water, or would you rather have the automobile makers make more money? And that's always a tension there. Okay, now the first thing is that under common law, you can sue other people for damage to persons or property under the theory of nuisance. That is, if you are hurt by somebody's managing their property in a way that hurts you or your property, you can always sue them under nuisance. For example, a slaughterhouse next to your land may be a nuisance and may be either harming you or harming your property or your property values. Another thing you can do is you can always sue under negligence and strict liability, which we talked about in the last couple of lectures. But mostly, environmental law comes down to regulation. Regulation by counties, states, or the federal government. The state of California has a statute called the California Environmental Quality Act. Under that act, you have to have an environmental review or an environmental impact statement for almost every major kind of construction or other action that you want to take in this state. And the thing that bothers a lot of people about CEQA, that is California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, that is, it's possible to sue for tons of different things under that act and stop the progress of these projects for sometimes years while the lawsuit on CEQA wins its way through the courts, through the Superior Court, through the Court of Appeals, to the California Supreme Court. A lot of people don't think that's correct. A lot of people believe it's a critical element in protecting our environment. A few of the things that CEQA looks at are the impact of traffic, the impact on air quality, the impact on water quality, the impact on erosion and runoff. There's a lot of different actions under CEQA in the county of Napa about creating and managing and operating vineyards. We'll have to see about those as they go forward, all right? Now, that's California. Another huge set of regulations is done by the federal statute. The federal government's primary agency taking care of environmental impacts, of course, is the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. If you look on page 535 of your text in Exhibit 25-1, you will see all the major federal laws regarding the environment. And you can see how they have a major impact. Now, what you need is to do a project under the EPA, you need what's called an Environmental Impact Statement, an EIS. And that has to evaluate in a way that can be reviewed all of the major environmental impacts on air, land, water, animals, traffic, almost everything you can think of. The Environmental Impact Statement has to take care of and evaluate, okay? Now, one of the major impacts of federal environmental law is what's called the Superfund. The Superfund is a law that's set up to take care of the costs of mitigating environmental problems caused by someone. Now, those costs can be absolutely huge. For example, you may have to dig up a bunch of dirt, and that dirt may be contaminated with gasoline or oil. You have to clean the dirt, or if you can't clean it, you have to take it to a specific kind of waste site and dump it. Those can be huge costs. So it's interesting to note that many of those disposal sites are extremely expensive to clean up. Now, who is responsible for the cleanup cost under the Superfund? The people that are responsible are called potentially responsible persons. PRP. The potentially responsible persons are either the generator of the waste, or the transporter of the waste, or the owner or operator of the site, or the current owner of the site. Folks, this is strict liability. Remember, it doesn't make any difference if you thought about it or helped or tried to do it all the right way. If you're involved, then you're liable. And the liability is joint and several. Remember, we talked about that before. Joint and several liability. What does that mean? It means that everybody is liable for all of it. Everybody is liable for all of the costs of the cleanup. Now, it doesn't mean that if one person pays some and the other person pays some, that both of them have to pay it all. And as a matter of fact, if one person does pay it all, they can go against the others that are liable for contribution. But joint and several liability on these kinds of things can be huge. Huge dollar cost, okay? Now, let's take, for example, a gas station. I represented a gas station maybe 10 or 15 years ago that had a problem for rusted out gas tanks. And they had to put monitoring wells to monitor the flow of the gasoline. They had to take out a bunch of dirt and clean it up. It was a huge cost. Luckily, as part of this, there was a major gas company involved, and they were required to shoulder most of that burden. But my client had to pay some of that. Also, you may wonder why, for example, some properties don't seem to have anything done with them. For example, in Napa, on the corner of First Street and Silverado, there is an abandoned gas station. Why hasn't somebody done something with that abandoned gas station? My guess is, and I don't know this for a fact, my guess is that there's hazardous waste under the ground of that abandoned gas station. Some sort of tank leaked, or oil came out of the repair shop or something, but there's a cost to cleaning that up. And the current owner of the site, the former owner of the site, all would be responsible for that, but nobody's stepping up. Now, there is a defense to being a PRP, that is a potentially responsible person, and that's called innocent landowner. If you own the land and did not participate in the hazardous waste, and you did not know, or should have known, about the hazardous waste, and you actually investigated, and your investigation showed that there was no hazardous waste on the property, then you may, I underline may, you may escape liability. So if you're thinking about buying property and there is any possibility of having hazardous waste on it, and there are a number of different properties all around cities and counties and states where you may not think that they had hazardous waste, it's up to you to determine that they didn't, or you could easily be on the hook for lots and lots of money under a Superfund cleanup cost. Okay? All right, great. That's it. Have a good week, and I'll talk to you next week when we go over whatever it is we're going to go over then. Goodbye.